Chapter 25 No Place Like Home. Home, sweet Germany. Anne couldn't stop smiling in such beautiful weather. She and Charles had arrived in Berlin on October 11th, 1938, a day when the sun shone warm and golden, and trees along the wide boulevards blazed red and orange. Ostensibly, they'd returned to Germany to attend an aeronautics conference, but in truth, Charles wanted his family to spend the winter there. This trip would really be about doing some groundwork on homes, nurses, households, etc. As Anne and Charles walked along the Tiergartenstrasse to the American Embassy for tea, she caught sight of her reflection in a shop window. She was surprised to see how happy she looked. Beside her, Charles appeared happy too. The city, Anne decided, was a delight. Neither Charles nor Anne commented on all the signs and posters. They were hanging practically everywhere and declared Jewry is criminal and Jews not wanted. Even though neither of the Lindberghs read German, they could not have mistaken the hook-nosed caricatures that accompanied the words. Evidence of Germany's persecution of the Jewish people was obvious. Just 6 days before their arrival, Hitler's government had passed a decree ordering Jews to carry special identification cards, and their passports were marked with a large J, so Nazi authorities could easily identify them. It would be another year before they were required to wear a Jewish star on their clothing. These latest laws had been widely reported in both European and American newspapers, but neither Anne nor Charles commented on any of it. Instead, both chirped about Berlin's appearance of prosperity. The shops are luxurious, gushed Anne. 2 days later, the couple attended a dinner at the Flyers Club. Dressed in evening clothes, they floated through a sea of jeweled and uniformed guests. Everyone admired Charles, spoke politely, saluted, or shook his hand. Again, he was struck with how comfortable he felt, how completely at home. Both he and Anne agreed with Prince Kinsky a Sudetenland German and head of the Austrian Aero Club, that a controlled press like Germany's was preferable to the free press of the United States or Britain. Kinsky even sounded a lot like Charles when he launched into his view that the British Empire could not withstand another war. It would break into pieces, the prince said, and that would be a great loss to civilization and the white race. Anne was seated beside Kinsky during dinner, and at first she found him amusing, but over dessert he launched into a vicious tirade against Jews, calling them creepers and parasites. He suggested that they all be expelled to Madagascar since they could not be used even by our civilization. Anne could not believe what she was hearing. Her Nazi hosts had up to now been careful to insulate the Lindberghs from that kind of talk. I was depressed, she admitted, but not depressed enough to stop house hunting. She looked at several homes. One particularly lovely cottage was located in an idyllic Berlin suburb with a big sign posted at its city limits that read, "Jews are not wanted here." Again, Anne felt depressed, but still she kept looking. A few days later, the couple walked through a large, heavily furnished house in Wannsee. Its large garden extended downhill to a river with swans. It would be an excellent place for John and land, said Charles, but when Charles spoke with officials in the German Air Ministry about signing the lease, they talked him out of it. There seemed to be something strange about the transaction, said Charles. Eventually, it was revealed that the house belonged to a Jewish family who'd fled the country. Officials did not think it would do for such distinguished guests to live there. The Lindberghs should pick someplace else. Architect Albert Speer, who would later become Hitler's Minister of Armaments, and War Production, even offered to help. He would be glad to build them a house on any site they liked. Even this incident did not shake Charles' resolve Charles's resolve to live in Berlin. He viewed the Jewish problem as an internal German problem, unimpor- unimportant to the larger political and military situation. Besides, he wrote in his journal, the, the Jews were apparently to blame for Germany's ruinous economy after World War One. While the rest of the country starved, they obtained the ownership of a large percentage of property in Berlin and other cities, lived in the best houses, drove the best automobiles, and mixed with the prettiest German girls. Of course, all this was vile propaganda perpetrated by the Nazi government. Did Charles accept these lies as truth? Later actions would suggest he did. A German eagle for an American one. The American embassy's ballroom looked magnificent on the evening of October 18th, 1938. Elaborate floral centerpieces decorated the silver and crystal-laden table, and an orchestra played softly. American officials mingled with German military advisors. A men's dinner hosted by Ambassador Hugh Wilson was being given in honor of both Charles and Hermann Göring, who had recently been promoted to Field Marshal General. Wilson, newly appointed to his post, hoped the event would help him get to know both men better. Göring arrived last. Pushing his way through the guests, he approached Charles, who stood at the back of the room, and thrust a red leather box at him. Then Göring launched into a speech. A member of Wilson's staff stepped forward to translate. Göring was presenting the pilot with the Service Cross of the German Eagle with Star, the highest decoration the Reich could bestow on a foreigner, given by order of the Führer. Charles opened the box. Gleaming inside was a white enamel cross, bordered by 4 small swastikas, and hung on a red ribbon. The citation accompanying the medal explained it was being awarded for service to the Reich. Charles, according to an army officer standing next to him, seemed surprised. Then the guests applauded and everyone sat down to dinner. Charles appeared to think little more about it. And in fact, he never spoke about the medal publicly. He did, however, send this note to Goring. I want to thank you especially for the honor which you conferred on me. I hope that when the opportunity presents itself, you will convey my thanks to the Reichschancellor Hitler. It is difficult for me to express adequately my appreciation for the decoration and for the way in which you presented in that evening. It is an honor which I shall always prize highly. Broken glass. At the end of the month, the Lindberghs headed back to Iliek to pack and collect the children. Although no lease had yet been signed, they felt sure German officials would find them a suitable home. Less than a week later, on the nights of November 9th and 10th, 1938, violent mobs surged through the streets of Germany, Austria, and the newly annexed Sudetenland. Shouting, Judenschwein! Jewish pigs! They burned over 250 synagogues, looted and destroyed more than 7,000 Jewish businesses, desecrated cemeteries, and vandalized homes, schools, and hospitals. Afterward, more than 30,000 Jewish men were rounded up and transported to concentration camps. Afterward, propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels, who'd incited the violence, remarked coldly, "We shed not a tear." Reading an account of the event, which became known as Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass. In the newspaper, Charles was confused. I do not understand these riots on the part of the Germans, he admitted in his journal. It seems so contrary to their sense of order and their intelligence. They have undoubtedly had a difficult Jewish problem, but why is it necessary to handle it so unreasonably? But the news horrified Anne. Finally, she seemed to grasp the hellishness of Germany's treatment of the Jews. "How can we go there to live?" she asked. With its lack of heat and electricity, Iliac was impossible in the winter. America remained out of the question, and Charles felt nothing but disdain for Britain nowadays. He was still pondering choices and hadn't completely eliminated Germany when the New York Times published a front page article revealing the Lindbergh's plan to move to Berlin. Remarked the reporter sarcastically, "The recent abandonment of many Jewish homes might make available apartments for rent." Other publications jumped on the story. With confused emotions, we say goodbye to Colonel Charles A. Lindbergh, who was to go and who wants to go and live in Berlin, presumably occupying a house that once belonged to Jews, wrote E. B. White for the New Yorker magazine. If he wants to experiment further with his artificial heart, his surroundings there should be ideal. And several editorial cartoons published in newspapers across the country portrayed Charles proudly wearing his Nazi medal on his chest. It was Dr. Carroll who finally set his protege straight. Writing from New York, where he'd returned to his work at the Rockefeller Institute, he explained the growing anti-German feeling in America since news of Kristallnacht. "Cancel your plans," he advised. "A move to Berlin wouldn't sit well with Charles's fellow Americans." Already, moviegoers hissed whenever Charles appeared on newsreels. Trans World Airlines, TWA, formerly TAT, removed the phrase "the Lindbergh line" from its marketing, and Jewish booksellers began boycotting Anne's latest book, "Listen, the Wind." Anne Anne fumed at what she called unfair labeling. Her husband was not and never has been anti-Semitic. She noted, however, that he was marvelously untouched by all the controversy. At the end of November, the Lindberghs rented an apartment on the Avenue du Maréchal Malnory in Paris. And yet Charles's deep admiration for Germany was not seriously dampened. On the contrary, crossing the border from Belgium into Germany just a month later, he was captivated by the fine-looking young German immigration officer whose air of discipline and precision was in sharp contrast to the inefficiency of the French. Nazi Germany still offered the striking image of virility and modern technology he prized. A hard decision. In April 1939, Charles made a hard decision. It was time to return to America. After 3 years, he still had misgivings about his homeland, but this decision wasn't about him. It was about saving Western civilization. Weeks earlier, on March 15th, Hitler had broken his diplomatic promises and seized the rest of Czechoslovakia and appeared to be sizing up Poland. A short time later, Prime Minister Chamberlain, at last recognizing the futility of appeasing the dictator, announced that Britain would go to the aid of Poland if invaded. France made a similar pledge. Charles read Hitler's speech justifying the invasion in the morning newspaper and found the Führer's reason. The Nazi expansionist policy of Lebensraum, plausible and well stated. Certainly it was unfortunate the dictator hadn't kept his word. But what politician did? He'd simply moved a little faster than other nations have in breaking promises. Obviously, Hitler held the future of Europe in his hand, Charles wrote in his journal. Civilization depends upon his wisdom far more than on the action of the democracies. In fact, Charles now believed France and Britain should all form an alliance with the Third Reich. It is time to return from it is time to turn from our quarrels and to build our white ramparts again, he said. Our civilization depends on a united strength among ourselves, on a strength too great for foreign armies to challenge, on a western wall of race and arms which can hold back the infiltration of inferior blood, an English fleet, a German air force, a French army, an American nation, standing together as guardians of our common heritage, sharing strength, dividing influence. But he knew this wouldn't happen because of the short-sightedness and vacillation of British and French statesmen. He could do nothing in Europe to ward off war, but he could use his influence back home to keep America out of it. So on April 8th, 1939, Charles again slipped away, this time boarding a ship bound for New York City. He left Anne, the boys, and the dogs behind in Paris. He felt, returning to hostile territory. It was best if he went alone. And looked over the situation. He would cable when it was safe for them to follow.